In most hobbies that involve finding the best gear, building the best systems, having the latest and greatest, you typically find two types of people. Now, the first, more common type is always going to be hyped about that newest, latest, best thing. They're ready to dump the old stuff and buy the new stuff pretty much at the drop of a hat. Other type is a little bit more emotional. They've got those couple of components that they've always used, always loved. They're always trying to make the rest of the system fit around that. I tend to be that second type, and I've grown pretty attached to my DX170. I use it to practice music, play music in the car, listen to music while I'm working. With the release of the iBasso DX180, in order to really claim that throne as the budget DAP king, it can't just win in my mind with the features and performance and all of that. It's gonna have to capture my heart too. So, is it up to the task? What's going on, everybody? This is Steve from Bloom Audio. Today we're going to talk about the iBasso DX180. Now, when it comes to iBasso's digital audio players, within each series, DX100, 200, 300, each step tends to be pretty incremental. For example, if you look at the 300 and the 320, they're very close, and without having some previous knowledge, you might have a hard time telling exactly what's different about the two of them. Similarly, the 160 and 170 definitely had some improvements in the performance and in the sound, but not a huge jump. So is DX180 another incremental update over the 170, or is it a little something more? So we're going to take a look at the what, the specs, the basics of the design and use, who's it for, where exactly does this fit into the pantheon of digital audio players, and should you buy it? Let's take a closer look. The DX160 and DX170 were budget-friendly by audiophile standards, HiFi DAPs that offered a pretty simple user experience through Android OS, with a little bit of iBasso tinkering on top of that. In the same way that 170 bumped the price and the features a little bit from 160, 180 is looking to do that again with some upgrades to the Android OS and some pretty big upgrades to the hardware. The biggest difference here is that Snapdragon 665 processor, which offers a pretty large performance increase over the 170. The build here is the best I've seen in the 100 series. Now, granted, I haven't gone back to some of the earlier models, which do have a more unique look to the kind of plain looking 160 and 170. Along with that, the battery life has been much improved. In my practical testing, I want to say the 180 gets nearly twice the battery of a new DX170 that I was able to check out, one with just a few weeks of use on it. And along with that, they've added the option to remove the backplate to replace the battery. So if you plan on using this for a few years and that battery life starts to dwindle, you'll be able to replace that easily without having to send it to China for a repair. DX180 comes with Android 13 pre-installed. And along with that, now if you're familiar with previous iBasso devices, there's an app store called APK Pure, which was like one step above spyware maybe in terms of the ads and everything else in there. DX180 now comes with the Google Play Store pre-installed, so you don't have to go through the process of removing the App Store, side-loading a new one, or any of that. That's a big win as well. As I mentioned, the performance is significantly improved. While the DX170, you could go into developer mode to make some tweaks and get it running fairly smoothly. DX180 is smooth and responsive right out of the box. In terms of key specs, DX180 has a 5-inch 1080p capacitive touch panel. Processor is that Snapdragon 665. It comes in two versions, one with 3 gigs of RAM and 32 gigs of internal storage. That will be $469, and another version with 4 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of internal storage for $529. The estimated battery life is about 15.5 hours on low gain. The DAC is a quad Cirrus Logic CS43131. For the balanced 4.4mm output, your max output is 6 VRMS, which gives you about 690 milliwatts at 32 ohms. For the single-ended output, your max is 3 VRMS, which gives you about 281 milliwatts at 32 ohms. DX180 supports Bluetooth version 5.0 with all the standard codecs. In terms of the sound, the tuning is very much in line with the DX170 and the DX260. I find 180 falls somewhere in between the two of those. It has that slightly more organic sound of the 170, captures a little bit more of the detail and a little bit of the treble extension from the 260. Again, landing somewhere in between there, largely with a reference sound that provides some added dynamics and a little bit of warmth that's missing from the 260. What it really feels like iBasso did here with the DX180 is eliminate some of the pain points of budget players. They've always been able to nail the sound. The 160 and 170 were great sounding, really detailed players for the price. But they came up short on the performance and some of the user experience aspects. 180 improves those user experience aspects while also providing a slight improvement in the sound, really providing a strong budget player here. So, who should be on the lookout for this one? The first piece of DX180's appeal here is definitely the price. With $529 for the sort of deluxe version and $469 for the standard version, that's still giving you really solid performance for the price. Puts it right up against DAPs like the VO M11 or the Hibi R6. And at this price, the build quality is solid. It's not the best I've seen at this price and definitely can't compete with a lot of higher tier players from brands like Cayenne or Astral & Kern. The Android system is another key aspect here. If you're looking for a player where you'll be able to install any player app, streaming app, anything else, do some other customizations with the UI, the look, any of that, DX180 is a strong pick. However, if you're coming in with an existing collection, you're looking for a player you can drop it all in or just stick in your SD card, the Mango player is pretty solid, but I find it works best as a secondary option. Doesn't feel like a primary player in the way that, again, players from other brands come, or ones that are dedicated players without the Android system. And unlike the DX260 or the higher tier iBasso players, 180 doesn't have the option to boot directly into Mango OS to avoid the Android system entirely. The tuning is another consideration here. DX180 can match, maybe exceed in some aspects, what the DX260 is doing in iBasso's lineup. But the 260 gives you a wider sound stage, better imaging separation, just a little bit better resolution and refinement in the sound. Now, 260 is also a little bit drier sounding than the 180, but kind of on the overall scale, 180 is definitely more on that reference end. So if you're looking for something warmer, a Cayenne N3 Ultra, or even any of the Astral & Kern players are gonna give you a little bit softer highs, a little bit more warmth in the mid-range. So DX180 is really for someone who's looking in this $500 price point, understands the limitations there, and wants that more reference sound and that Android app-based experience. So now the question is that you? Should you buy the DX180? So as you're making that decision, you're looking for a DAP that's simple but powerful, trying to find something that meets your specific needs, it's definitely worth looking at a couple comparisons. With the release of a new product, you can always get that last generation a little cheaper, whether it's, the remaining stock that stores have or on the used market. It's worth looking at the DX170 here. In terms of pure sound, do think there are some improvements with the DX180, but it's not huge. And if I'm being totally honest, I don't think I can tell the difference in a blind test reliably. The big improvements are, the system performance, the user experience, and the battery life. So if you don't need a player that's gonna last you 10 plus hours of listening. Maybe you primarily use it on walks or working out, that sort of thing, a couple hours a day. You're really more concerned about just getting the best sound quality for the price and can put up with some of the performance issues. DX170 is still a really strong pick here, especially at the prices you'll be able to pick it up at as it gets phased out. If rather than trying to maximize price performance, you're trying to kind of get a look at two different ends of the spectrum, the Ashton & Kern SR35 is a good comparison. SR35 definitely wins on the build quality. DX180 is great. SR35 is a step up. It's a little bit more expensive too. And also SR35 wins if you're looking for a dedicated player that you're gonna just put your existing collection of music on rather than to stream with, which is where Ashton & Kern usually wins out. Now, DX180 has a stronger app experience, and in terms of the tuning, SR35 is a little bit warmer, a little bit softer. Treble doesn't have quite the same extension. Maybe a pro, maybe a con, depending on who's listening, and you're gonna get more of the warmth, maybe a little more vocal focus with the SR35, where DX180 has that cleaner, more linear extension through the low end, and I tend to feel a little more sub-bass coming out of the 180. So if you're looking for that relaxed presentation, you just want to listen to your collection of music, you don't want to have to worry about apps and everything else, SR35 remains a really strong pick here. But for a lot of us who are more focused on the apps these days, and if you want that more reference accurate sound signature, DX180 is the way to go. And just putting that all together, the design, the build, the user experience, the sound quality, all of that in DX180 is pretty astounding for the price. And with those UI and experience improvements in particular, I think that's going to be enough to unseat my beloved DX170 as my daily driver. So, anybody out there in the market for a used DX170? Thanks for watching. Check out DX180 and a lot of other great products at bloomaudio.com. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll be back soon with more high-fidelity audio content.